Hola, mi gente. My name is Maria Lopez Twina. I'm the author of the bilingual children's chapter book and animated family series, MariVi the Master Navigator, and the creator of this new podcast, Navigating Dos Mares, or Navigating Two Seas. MariVi the Master Navigator was created for all immigrant families, but especially for children who are growing up with two cultures and two languages, navigating life for themselves and their foreign-born relatives. This podcast was created to help us older kids, or the adult children of immigrants, better understand our childhood experiences and the impact that they've had on our lives. In this episode, we'll hear our guest share their story about growing up bilingually and biculturally, and how their childhood experiences became their superpower. Thanks for joining our community. Bienvenidos. So in this episode, we'll be speaking to Jose Villa, founder and president of Sensis. Jose, welcome and thank you for joining. Tell us about your background, foreign-born, U.S.-born. What was your household like and your neighborhood like growing up?
So I describe myself as like generation, like kind of 1.5. I'm not first generation. I'm not second generation, but I'm kind of in the middle because I was born in the United States. I'm the youngest of 5 children. My oldest siblings were born in Cuba, and then myself. And what my sister closest in age to me was also born in the United States. So, and both my parents were born in Cuba and migrated here in the 60s and early 70s. So I was kind of in the middle, right? Because I was born here, but my older siblings and my parents are very, obviously born on the island, and so we were kind of like that. We were kind of that first generation that was born here, but we weren't unlike our siblings in that sense. And then
Right.
I grew up in Southern California, and specifically in the San Fernando Valley in the Burbank, Glendale area. So when I was like a baby, we lived in Glendale. And at the time, Glendale was a big sort of nexus. It was made up of a large Cuban exile community. Glendale is no longer that, but at the time when I was first born, Glendale was very much like the center of the Cuban world here in LA, and then we moved to a nearby town, just literally the town next door, which is Burbank, famous Burbank, California. So kind of the heart of the valley. So that's where I grew up. And
Okay. All right. So what were there a lot of? Well, it sounds like there were a lot of Hispanics and Cubans in Glendale. What was your home life like? Was it Spanish only, English with siblings, a collective ethos? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my household was very much Spanish only. So actually when I started in school, in kindergarten, I did not speak English. I only spoke Spanish. The same with my other sister, closest in age. And obviously for my older siblings, that was the same situation for them. They came over when they were babies, but yeah, we didn't speak any English at home other than as I got a little bit older, me and my sister, who I was closest with, and my brother, who also lived with us for a while, we would speak in English to each other. But in our house, it was Spanish only, Spanish all the time. My parents really didn't speak English. My mom, spoke a little bit of English. My dad, even a little less. It's actually funny because they actually speak more English now than they did when I was growing up. So they literally did not know how to speak English. So everything was in Spanish all the time. And then all my family, we had tons of aunts and uncles and cousins, and everybody was same thing. So it was just like everybody was Cuban and everybody spoke Spanish all the time.
Interesting. Okay. Were the roles in the home, male, female, very traditional? Was it multiple generations, including grandparents, or was it just the parents and the kids?
It was a mix. Early on, it was basically both my parents. They still married to this day. So I had a traditional sort of mom and dad at home, and then with my siblings, I had much older siblings. So by the time I was a little bit older, my oldest sister had moved out, so I didn't really grow up with her. She got married and left the house. My brother lived with us for a little while, but not very long because he was older and moved out. And then my sister and I basically grew up, in our parents' house. We did not have my grandmother lived nearby, but not with us. And then I would say, like in later adolescence, my mom's aunt moved in with us. She had been widowed. She had been living in Puerto Rico, and she moved. And my mom started taking care of her. So I had a grand aunt that lived with us. She's kind of like a grandmother. So we did have kind of 3 generations in the house. I would say from the time I was from middle school through high school.
Okay. All right. So very collective.
And then my sister didn't leave the house until she got married, which is very traditional, right?
Very. Yes. We've had some conversations about that. Yeah. So that was the expectation, right?
At one point, her fiance moved in with us, kind of like he was before they officially got married, and then she left the house because that was not even an option, right? That my sister would leave the house before she got married.
Oh, of course. Did you get to leave the house before you got married?
I did. Yes. Yeah. We also grew up in my sister used to really have a hard time with it because there were very different rules for me than for her as a boy, as a girl. So I was given a lot more freedom to do a lot of things that she was not allowed to do growing up.
Yes. Yeah. Very typical then. Typical.
My sister had a lot of issues, a lot of the culture shock just because of the rules that applied to her, because she grew up in we went to the same high school in Burbank High School, but she very much kind of I would say became very Anglified, and all her friends were white, and she was the cheerleader, and she fully was American, and my parents were not. And there was just a lot of strife around that for her, because she couldn't do the things that she wanted to do, because all her other friends, were allowed to sleep over at people's houses. That's not a thing you can do, right? She was allowed, all her friends were allowed to go to parties. She was not, all her friends were allowed to stay out late. She was not, And so when I came to that age too, I was allowed to do more by far than she was, because I was a boy, and it's different. And that's our culture, right? Tú eres hombre. Es diferente.
Yes.
You did not like that. So.
No, I can't blame her, right? Okay. So did you play the role of navigator like MariVi does? Did you translate or interpret the U.S. culture or anything like that for your parents, especially if they weren't English language proficient at that time?
Yeah, I would say probably a little more for my mom than my dad. I mean, my dad had his own business, but it's kind of interesting because they both kind of, I did help probably both of them in some ways more than others. I would also say my older brother too was also played a lot of that role with my father in particular. But they didn't, I had to explain everything to them. They just didn't understand. A lot of the things for me growing up was just they didn't understand how school worked, and they literally didn't understand grades. When you get a report card every semester, they literally did not understand the grading system, right? So I used to joke with my friends. I would tell my parents this actually means this, and they had no idea what it really meant, right? Not that I didn't get good grades and everything, but they just had no clue. And particularly that was a major part of our lives. As I kind of got older and was going away to college, applying to college and all that, they just had no idea. Especially because my sister and I were the first ones to go to college in our family. So my parents just literally had no idea how to navigate any of that. They didn't understand any of it. I had to do everything on my own.
Mm-hmm. When you got to school, were most of your peers Hispanic, or did you have American ones? And did you ever feel like you didn't fit in?
So again, when I first started in school, because I didn't speak English, I got put in ESL.
Right.
So I got segregated with the kids that were immigrants and didn't speak English, and then I learned English very quickly, and then I kind of moved out of that. I could interact with them and I knew them, but I also most of my friends were the white kids, a lot of the Asian kids, honestly.
Well, you mentioned the sleepover with your sister, which I know. Yeah. How about dressing for church or wearing jeans? Were there any cultural clashes around that? Where the Latinos are, as we're more formal. We care a lot more about appearances because we are collective. Did you run into any issues surrounding that growing up?
Well, I would say that it was, it was very important, particularly for my mom. Every year that back to school, I had new clothes, and that that I presented well, right? Like,
Yes.
so you couldn't go to school with the old clothes because, God forbid, what would people say? That and we did not. We were comfortable, but we did not. We were by no means. We didn't have a lot of means, right? So
Yeah.
like we definitely, like, my family prioritized things like that. And it was funny because I felt like a lot of it was for appearances, like, and how you would be perceived by everybody else. Like, God forbid you go back to school with old shoes. You had to have new shoes. Like,
Yes.
that was like a very big thing. Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
of course. It's a reflection of them too,
Yes.
right? So,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
All right.
Again, as a boy, like, some of the other things were less of an issue for me than they were for my sister. Like, what she could wear was very much, much more restricted than what I could wear, right?
Do you have a sense of ever leaving your roots and returning to them, or like in that retroculturation process, or were you always comfortable having that duality and you embraced both because you were raised in a Hispanic neighborhood?
Yeah, I would say I definitely sort of like retroculturated and like super embraced my culture when I left home, when I went away to college. Like, for me, it was one of those things where, like, I didn't realize how immersed I was in, like, Cuban culture and, more broadly, like, sort of Hispanic culture while I was growing up, right? It wasn't until I left and I went to a place that was very much different from my culture, which is I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
And, like, that was just like culture clash. Like, that was where I felt the culture clash. And I realized, like, because even at the time, Boston's changed since then, but, like, at the time there were, like, no Hispanics in Boston. It was like, I remember getting there, like, where are the Mexicans? Like, it's just weird. It was just like, there's no Hispanic people here. And it was, this is in the mid 90s mid to late 90s in Boston. And that's when I really, like, sort of embraced my culture. And I started actually hanging out, like, a lot of my friends were, like, Hispanic and Cuban. I joined, like, there was, like, a Cuban club. And, like, I really, like, I became a Cubanazo, like, when I was in college, right? Like, that was when I, like, fully embraced my Cubanidad.
Oh, that's so funny. We've heard that over and over when you look back now. Was it like the whole year, that first year?
Yeah, I would say that first year. Yeah. And there was probably obviously a lot of other things going on too. It's the first time leaving my house by myself, being on your own. So there was, like, there were multiple factors at play there, but, like, the cultural thing really, really became prominent. And it took me about a year before I kind of felt comfortable. And then I kind of, like, then I started really embracing my culture, not just, like, in terms of making friends and being around Cubans, but, like, also, like, the classes I was taking, and I really, like, dove into, Spanish language, and, I started taking classes in Spanish. And then I actually went and studied abroad in Spain when I was in, and that actually, like, supercharged my, like, my retroculturation. Because when I went to Spain and lived in Madrid, it was a semester in my junior year. Like, I just felt like I was, like, home, like I was, like, where I belong. Like, these are my people. And, like, I was just, like, that just everything just sort of blossomed for me there. Like, I started actually, I didn't go by Jose growing up. I went by, everybody knew me as Joe. And so I didn't actually start using the name Jose until I was in Spain. And I'm like, I'm in Spain. My name's Jose. Like, my whole life growing up, I'd always tell people, no, I'm Joe. I go by Joe. And it wasn't until, like, I was living in Spain that I became Jose. Like, that was my name, and I never went back from that.
Oh, interesting. So do you remember when you started using Joe? Was it when you were in grade school, or?
As early as I can remember, like, when the second I started, like, hanging out with people outside of my house, right? So probably, like, when I first started, playing with the neighborhood kids, that was, I was Joe. Definitely in school. Once I was in public school, like, I was Joe.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And it's interesting now because I have friends from high school and from early college that know me as Joe. And it's like that there's like I have, like, two sort of, like, social groups and I can, they're demarcated by what they call me, you know. And actually, growing up in my family too, anybody who knows me through my family, I had a different name too. I had a nickname that everybody called me Cheo, and so that's my Cuban name. Anybody who knows me through my family, you know, growing up called me Cheo. Anybody who knew me from like, you know, school all the way through like middle part of college knew me as Joe. And then anybody who like knew me from middle of college beyond is Jose.
Do you feel that even though they call you something differently, today you are the totality of who you are, totally integrated and totally comfortable with who you are?
I would say yes, I am kind of like integrated in the totality, but like I wasn't the case, obviously, right? Like
Sure.
over all those, right? I would say maybe now, maybe there's the Cheo and then there's the Jose. Those are like the two maybe identities.
You eliminated one.
100% integrated.
Do you have a sense of how you've turned all your cultural roots and the background and all of these things we just talked about into your superpower today?
Well, you know, for me, I do think it was a cultural superpower. It would allow me to do a lot of things. It allowed me to sort of like move in and out of a lot of worlds, is what I would say. It's like that was kind of my cultural superpower. Like when I was younger and in grade school and in high school, I was able to. I could go to the soccer game with all the Mexican kids who were chanting, you know, things in Spanish, and like because I spoke Spanish, I could interact with them and connect with them, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then I could also. You know, I was Joe, the kid that was all friends with all the mainstream kids, right? And in college, I was able to do that too, to a certain extent. When I was in Spain, I definitely was like the cultural ambassador, right? Because there was all these Americans that were my friends there, but I was the person who spoke Spanish, who understood Spanish culture, and like I could go in and out of both. And then even like after I came back, and I used to like socially go out to a lot of like Latin nightclubs, and like I could navigate those two worlds. I could go to like a salsa club,
Yeah.
you know, on a Friday night where everybody was Hispanic, you know, and like most people didn't speak English. And then on a Saturday night, I can go to like the whitest, nightclub or bar in Redondo Beach with all my all my white friends from USC, right? I could go in and out of those two worlds like seamlessly. And even in the business world, that's a lot of kind of why I got into what I got into, you know, in terms of marketing and Hispanic advertising. It's like I can navigate those two worlds. I understood, you know, Hispanic culture and the Hispanic world, and I could like also walk into a boardroom or, you know, a meeting with somebody, you know, with people that weren't from that world. But also part of it, also the way I look too, you know, which is, you know,
I was going to say,
an experience that I don't know, maybe it's not. I think it's common for a lot of Cubans, you know, especially very light-skinned, blue-eyed. Like people didn't think I was Hispanic, right? So but then with a name like Jose Villa, you obviously are. But I could physically navigate those two worlds like seamlessly. Like I could go in and out. I could be the whitest guy that you can imagine, like, you know,
yeah.
and totally from your world, and then I could become the Hispanic guy that's like speaks Spanish perfectly, understand, you know, can make the jokes, and just I'm in that world. I knew both, and I could just go in and out. No problem.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any advice for anyone who's listening who may not have retroacculturated, may be in the process, may refuse to speak Spanish, but are culturally Hispanic, in terms of the process, or any just words of wisdom? Yeah.
You know, obviously for everybody, it's a very personal journey, right? And like everybody's situation is different. I mean, I guess my only advice would be that like you should definitely like embrace and not be ashamed of your culture. Like, you know, I think we all go through that stage, and I don't even, you know, and I think in my case, I even kind of wasn't even, it's not fully conscious of it. You know, even as we were talking, I was kind of explaining like the whole Joe thing, I think was part of my not wanting to, you know, embrace being Hispanic.
Sure.
And I wish I would have earlier, right? Like I wish I would have like not waited. I mean, it kind of happens organically when it happens, but I guess my advice is just like it, you know, don't be, I mean, I think we live in a very different time now too than when I was growing up or when you were like, it's just things are different. I remember when I was in like early elementary school, like, you know, a lot of Mexican kids would like say that they were French and that they didn't speak, they refused to speak Spanish. And it was like, and it was definitely frowned upon to speak Spanish. And you wanted to learn English, and you wanted to like get as far away from all things, Mexican and Hispanic as possible. And I feel kind of bad for people that kind of went through that experience, because they missed out on that. They missed out on their language, and they missed out on their culture, and I know a lot of people embrace it later on in life. And so I guess my advice is just like embrace it. Don't, I don't think it's as much of an issue for people now. I hope it isn't, but definitely embrace it.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Thank you so much for being with us. I mean, this has been really informative. Appreciate all of your wisdom and your life experience for sure. And for any listener who wants to follow up with Jose or engage with Jose, follow him at LinkedIn, Jose Villa at LinkedIn. Thank you, Jose.
Thanks for listening, and please join us on our next episode of Navigating Dos Mares. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at We Are MariVi, or check out our books on our website, wearemarivi.com.